Howdy once again, it's tubalcain, your YouTube shop teacher, and this time I'm standing here at the Craftsman lathe, and an Atlas lathe is the same pretty much. And the subject of this video is how to make a carriage stop. Now I have here several different carriage stops, and I'm going to build one in a several part video similar to this micrometer type, but I'm going to make a plain one without the micrometer adjustment on it. But if there's enough views on that, I will modify it and make it into this particular one. But if you watched a video several years ago where I made this one, and here's the title of that video, since I was never really satisfied with these commercially made Atlas ones, I had designed and built this one, and it really works quite well. But I must confess, I seldom use it. This clamps right to the bed and stops the carriage right at that point, because it's a chip collector and it's somewhat in the way. The problem with the carriage stops on the Atlas lathe is that the Atlas lathe is constructed with flat bedways rather than the V-ways like on South Bends and most other lathes, and because of that, the clamping mechanism on this stop simply pinches against the bed, and unless you really tighten it, there's a chance of you moving it or it cocking on you like that. And then you're going to probably spoil your piece. So you really have to clamp it down. So I will address that problem as we go through this build. But let me say one other thing first about these Atlas lathes. This is the closing lathe, but it's pretty much like a South Bend or other brands in that it has the V-ways, and here's the carriage stop for this particular lathe, and because of the construction you can see that with one bolt it is firmly held in place and it cannot cock or push. But this is not the kind we're going to build. We're going to build it for the South Bend, but I wanted you to see the other kinds. And some of you may not have a carriage stop and desire to make one, and it certainly is useful. I use it in most of my projects. One of the things that you're going to notice on these Atlas Craftsman lathes is that the bed has different thicknesses. Now the later models, as far as I know, are all ½ inch thick, as shown here by the reading on the micrometer. But in the older Atlases, and I'll take you out and show you my other one, it is 3/8 thick. And because of the difference in thickness, it requires a different type of clamp or carriage stop, or a carriage stop that can accommodate the different thicknesses. And with this one, as it was designed, you can see that it can be used for both, and the distance right here can vary, and that's the purpose of these little screws here, to allow you to change it to the different thicknesses of the lathe bed ways. And it's the same thing on this one. And this is the only one I've ever seen of this model. This is the most common one, but even on eBay it's going to be rather expensive. But this is also a micrometer one, and I'm just going to show you that. I'm not going to build this one. Well, it's January and I'm out in my cold garage. It's 10 degrees out here for the express purposes of showing you on this older Craftsman lathe of mine that the thickness of the bed is only 3/8 of an inch. So you can make this carriage stop to accommodate your lathe, whether it be the 3/8 or the ½ or make the stop as I'm going to show you, which I think will be multi-purpose. That is, it will fit either one. So back to the warm basement, please. These two Atlas carriage stops leave a little bit to be desired. But for the purposes of this video, I have a piece of 3/8 hot roll stock here just to illustrate how the carriage stop is clamped to that. And I'll refer to that from time to time. And on this one, again, that looks more professional, leaves a few things to be desired because it has only one bolt here. And also, both of these would look more professional if they had used a square bolt. This looks pretty unprofessional here with the wing nut, but possibly somebody added that on. But note here with this one, when it's clamped to a ½ inch bed, that there's really no room here where I'm trying to stick this cardstock so that it causes this micrometer dial to bind a little bit. Also, when they made this one, if I could take that apart, and I love this Blue Point wrench dedicated to this job. Whoop, spoke too soon. It works on the other one. Alright, let me grab an adjustable wrench here and take this off real quickly. That they got a little carried away here and drilled too close to that surface. Let me step over to the lathe again real quickly and show you a couple other features that are not only do I not care about, that nothing can much be done about it because of the very nature of the flat bed on the Atlas lathe. And these are a bit of an afterthought, I'm sure. Back over at the lathe, this is where I like this Blue Point wrench for loosening and unloosening. But one little glitch here that I don't like about this one is that if you do not have the stop itself extending out a little ways, you're going to strike with the wiper screw right there, and you can see that that's where I'm hitting, and sometimes if you're not careful, you may be confused on the adjustment there, so you have to have that out at least that far. So I didn't like that little feature, but I guess there's not too much that can be done about it, and that will also be a problem on the one that I'm going to build right now. And one other thing that I want to show you while I'm at the lathe. Most of the time when you're using a stop, your tool will be up fairly close to the chuck. Therefore, it puts the carriage stop in a most inconvenient spot. Down here below the headstock, if I can get some light in there. And you almost have to get on your knees or stoop over to find the bolts. That's one of the other reasons I like that wrench, but it is rather inconvenient, but then again, it is what it is. As mentioned earlier, the stop is actually pinching the bed, but notice that it doesn't extend very far into the bed, so it's not getting a very good purchase, if you will. And also on the bottom, because of the rack under here, the rack and pinion, that's the rack, you really only have 3/8 depth there. So it's catching this on the very outside, and even with two bolts holding it down, it has to be clamped very tight, and you got to be careful when you put it on that you don't have chips under here. Clean everything real well, or it has even more of a tendency to do that. But with all of those points noted, let's move on and show you what I'm going to do. As you know, I do not use a drawing. I kind of shoot from the hip and wing it. I would save time with a drawing, admittedly, but I like to forge ahead and make prototypes, but I think I spent more time with the prototypes than I would have at a drawing board. But I do not do CAD drawings, so I'm an old pencil and paper man. But there's the first prototype I made, but the mistake I made was using nylon, and this is just, as soft as it is, it's no fun to work with because it leaves such a horrendous burr, and I know that doesn't show up very well in the video, but I get a feel for the sizes and the shape and so on that by doing this. And I have even made these out of wood. Maple is a very good model, but in the end I made one out of aluminum, and there's a couple changes I will make. One, I'll use a smaller screw. This is a 3/8 cap screw, and that's how the adjustment has arrived. This is not going to have a micrometer on it, although it could be modified for that, and I may carry it one step further, but even this video is going to be several parts. But I will, instead of using a 3/8, I will use a 5/16. It looks a little bit more in proportion. Also, these two bolts will be a little farther apart, perhaps 1/8 of an inch farther apart, center to center. And looking at it from the bottom, these two bolts will be a little bit closer to the slot right here. Not as close as what they did here, but pretty close. we want the clamping to be here, not out here. And that's another mistake that they made here, that these two pivot points, I guess they're not a fulcrum, I'm not sure what to call them, but they need to be much farther out than that, because in the case of this, we have as much grip back here as we have right here. Those of you that had third grade science can realize that. This one was more thought out, I think, because that point is much farther back. I intend to make this stop so that it will fit either lathe with the 3/8 or the 1/2 inch bed, but of course, depending on which one you have, and it's unlikely that you have both, you can go with either one of these methods or the other, but mine's convertible. So for the 3/8, notice that this bottom plate is turned upside down, and that clamps securely onto a piece of 3/8 stock or the 3/8 bed. Now let me reverse it real quickly and show you how it mounts on the 1/2 inch bed. Now it's on the 1/2 inch bed. Notice that I am reversed right there. Now your tolerances have to be watched a little more carefully in order to do this. This was the easy way to do it, with adjusting screws, and let the poor sucker out in the field do the minor adjustments. And these are so loose in there that they should be Loctited in place if you were dedicating this to one machine or the other. Let me put this on the machine then and show you how it fits, and then let's get down to the actual job here. I know you're thinking, this guy talks too much, but on the final one, several other things can be done. We can put a radius right here if we want, just to pretty it up, or a bevel, chamfer, just whatever you would want to do depending on your own creativity. Here it is, mounted on the Craftsman lathe that has a 1/2 inch thick bed. Quite functional. And the adjustment is arrived at by moving this in and out, and you might well be advised to use a fine thread rather than a coarse if you want to make some finer adjustments. And also, by loosening this up, you see these interfere a little bit with the wrench. That's why I wanted to spread them just a little bit. But it also will fit just fine underneath the headstock here without interfering with anything. You always end up with this rocking business, so you have to be careful you got it all the way in and no chips. And here's the material that I'm going to use. It's 1 inch thick, 2 inch wide, cold rolled steel, and I bought a 6 inch piece from Hobby Metals. I've mentioned this outfit before, from Wisconsin, and they'll give you a very good service. It came in 2 days, and there it is on that page. Now, somebody asked me recently, where can I buy cast iron? Well, Hobby Metals, Bernie, has, in addition to aluminum and steel and drill rod, there are cast iron rods here. Now that's round, cast iron rounds. There's also plastic, Delron, black, white, and nylon. So he has a lot of different products that will help you. So now I need to cut this off so it is 1.5 inches long. So I'll lay that out, take it over to the bandsaw, whack it off. By the way, when Bernie sends you something, look at how nice the cuts are. They're perfectly square, and he deburrs everything. And it's even been degreased.